I'm a second generation beekeeper, and we operate a business out of Barrhead, and we run about 10,000 hives and mostly do honey production. So at our farm, we've, one more thing I wanted to say is I feel kind of like a no-name band opening up for Metallica if I have to go before Rob Dixon. But we've got a simple system. We don't have a ton of science into it, but in my younger years, I traveled around a little bit and worked in different places. One of them was Hawaii. I worked for a queen breeder there for a while, picked up quite a few good ideas and tried to take them home and incorporate them into our business. So that's where a lot of our ideas came from. This is a picture of the best hive I have on my farm. And as we're going through our hives in the spring, we try and pick those ones out for our breeders because they've survived the winter and, taken all the abuse that we give them. So we all like to see hives like this when we're opening them up, and that's kind of what stemmed from all this, because there's a bunch of hives on the yard that look like these ones, and then there's a bunch that are a lot weaker. So we're trying to take the genetics from these hives. We want to have all brood frames that look like that, and we kind of mark those off to the side and bring them all into our breeding yard. So that's kind of the first step in the spring. In May, we start setting up our breeding yard, and we take them from our own daughters of our own queens, and preferably ones that have survived a couple of winters. So what I've found over the years is often I wouldn't bring enough breeders in. I would pick up a few here and there, and then we were really struggling sometimes to find enough larvae on the days that we wanted to graft, because we're grafting quite a few eggs. So what I've done now is I bring in pretty much 2 complete yards into my queen breeding yard. So I have like 80 breeders to select from. And we do find that we kick a few out as we go too, as we select them. So there's another nice shot of some brood. I don't have a whole ton of great pictures I found out about my queen breeding setup, but so then we go out. Here's a picture of us on the ferry the one day. We use the 5-frame styrofoam taggart nukes, and I even use those for my cell builders. I make them up just with 3 frames of brood, lots of bees, and I've done some side-by-side trials where I used full box singles and I used the 5-framers, and I didn't find that it made a whole lot of difference. So this way you don't tie up a whole ton of brood, and we use queenless cell builders, and that's been working out pretty good for us. So we make them up late in May, and we're able to graft into them like 3 times with the same brood. And often we'll add a frame if they start to dwindle out. So here we are grafting. As you can see by the picture, we graft in the cab of our truck. It's pretty inexpensive setup for a queen grafting shack, and great way to set up and super mobile. So as we're preparing our cell builders and getting things ready, we just have the truck running with the heater on, and we put quite a bit of water on the floor mats, and we put wet towels in there. It brings the humidity up, and we find that helps a lot for the eggs not drying out as we graft. So we'll have a crew cab truck, and we'll have 3 or 4 guys grafting in there, and 1 guy running the cells back and forth and bringing frames of larvae. So this is kind of what we're looking for. The guys always like to have a few pictures of their grafts. They always have a little bit of healthy competition, which is good. And there's some nice cells that we raise. So that's pretty much it. We have a big breeding yard with all our breeders there, and then we just set up our 5-frame nukes, and we graft twice a week. So that we usually graft every Tuesday and Friday, I believe, and then every week we have 2 batches of cells come out, and we find that works pretty good. We can even make up our nukes a day ahead if we have a big hatch coming. So here's once the cells are getting close, we go out and we make up 1-framers in those taggart nukes, and we all our hives, we run excluders on them. So we go out into our hives and we take a frame of brood out of the bottom, and we'll check, make sure the queen's not on there, and then we'll take the surplus of bees out of the honey super, granted that there's enough bees up, and that ensures us that we're not taking the queen along. So that works pretty well. And we're able, like on that truck, I think there's, if it was full, I think it holds almost 450 nukes. So when we get out in a big day, a crew can make over 400 nukes in a day, so we can really get some numbers. I should be looking at my notes here. So this is a typical setup for us. We set all our one frame nukes down into yards with wintered hives, and we try and pick yards in areas where there's quite a few hives, and that way it allows lots of drone support, because I think that's really key on raising good queens, is having lots of drones. So we'll set up sometimes up to 250 nukes in a yard with 40 hives, but on average we do find that our takes are better if we keep it under 200 per yard. And I'm not sure if it's from drone support or if it's even orientation when you get a lot of nukes, or what it always is, but traditionally we're finding kind of that around that 150 nukes per yard is sort of our sweet spot. So we put the cells in. I think there was a picture here. So we just take our frames right out of our cell builders, and we pack them out to the yards, and just drop the cells in like that. We don't use incubators or any of that. We have in the past, but we've just found that it's an extra step and it takes more time. So you do run the risk of a queen hatching and making a mess with these, but we try to watch them pretty close, and for the most part it works out pretty good. And that's another reason why we make a couple extra cell builders, because you do have the odd one get out, and then we just usually let them go and become a hive. So here's another site. We like beekeepers, we like old yard sites, and it gives the bees or the queens lots of orientation spots too. So we try and mow the grass down, make it easier for them to get in. Then after about 3 weeks, we'll go through and we'll pick up all our one framers, and we'll bring them to yards that are set up like this, just in single boxes. And granted the queens laying well, then we transfer them into a full hive. And if they're not, we don't give them a second chance, and we just shake them out and boost up the other ones with it. And we've just found that oftentimes if they haven't taken their queen, it's too late and most of the brood's hatched out, so we don't find too much sense in putting another cell in. They're small colonies and they're pretty easy and cheap to make up, so we just go make up more. And this is a little bit of a later shot. You can see it in the canola. And the early ones, or pretty much all of them, will, after they're installed into these boxes, we'll put an excluder on them and a honey box. And the ones we make up in earlier June, oftentimes they'll bring us a box of honey, but we find the ones that are later on in the year, they just kind of build up enough to make through the winter and be a good hive for the next year. So this is traditionally how we winter them. We stack them up and put them in our building. This year's a bit of an exception. I've decided to winter them all outdoors just because I'm sort of running out of space and had a few issues in my building. So, but through the years it's worked well for us. They don't take quite as much of a beating, I feel like, inside, being a smaller colony. And generally they come out really nice in the spring, and they're some of our best hives for the next few years. So, and this is what we like to see, of course, in the spring before bringing them out. They're all eager to go. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of what we do. We like raising our own queens because it makes us less reliant on the queen market. And of course the cost of queens is just getting really high. So, I mean, the cost is a big thing that's driven us to do this, but it's also, we feel like we do get a better product. There are times where we have poor takes and things happen, and then, it feels like it's less worthwhile. But long term, we definitely we're going to keep going with this. It's been about 10 years that we've been raising our own queens, and we raise the majority of our stock and of our own, and then we do buy in some queens, make some later splits with them, or requeen a lot of hives. So we're not completely self-sustainable yet, and hopefully in the years to come we can sort of work towards that. But I think that's pretty much all I have. Does anyone have any questions, or are we going to save questions for later?